Welcome to the Antisocial Podcast. This is episode 171 with Shaun Farrugia of In Malice's Wake. But before we kick into this episode, if we haven't met already, my name's Andy Dowling. I am also a heavy metal bass player, muso metal warrior dude that plays in the Australian metal band Lord. And if you haven't heard our music already, go and check it out. Go to lord.net.au. I mean, you can definitely search for us on the socials, but sometimes if you just type Lord into certain search results, you come up with all sorts of rubbish. So that's our fault, by the way. Go to lord.net.au. You can check out our website. There are video clips. There's back catalogue information there. There's streaming music. There's historical information. There's heaps of stuff. Really, really easy to get a taste of what our music is all about. We have a brand new single out called United. Welcome back. And that is the first single off our upcoming album called Fallen Idols, which is due out at the end of April. So you can go to lord.net.au or you can go to lord.net.au/united, which has got the video clip. It's got all the information about the upcoming album, and there's lots of details there. If you enjoy the new song, please let me know what you thought, and please spread it around. It's been 5+ years since the last studio album, Digital Lies, and while we have been doing heaps of stuff in between, such as box sets and re-recordings and live albums and all sorts of stuff, it's been a while since our last studio album. So well, at least I'm a little bit nervous. So I'm hoping that it is received well and we are able to reach as many people as possible. So if you're feeling generous and you enjoy the music, please share it with your heavy metal friends, and hopefully they'll dig the music as well. But go and check it all out. lord.net.au. When I'm not flicking my hair back and forth on stage, I'm also hosting a second podcast called the Self-Starter Podcast, which is all about small business, self-employment, and freelancing. This has been up and running for the past 18 months or so, and season 1 is now finished as of the end of 2018, and season 2 will kick off in June of this year. Go and check it out, selfstarter.com.au. If you have your own business or you're wanting to start your own business, there's so much information there to help you kickstart or at least get you through any pain points that you might have on your own self-employment journey. And if you know anybody out there that is restless and dissatisfied in their job and just wants to get out and do their own thing, direct them this way as well. There might be some inspiring words from some of the guests that have been on the podcast to date that might help push people out of their comfort zone and get out there and live the lifestyle that they desire. Go and check it out, selfstarter.com.au. This week's shout out. Every week I pick one person to say thank you, put them on public record, and it's just my little way of giving back to say thank you to anybody that does just a little bit more than listening to the podcast. And by the way, you can just listen to the podcast. The fact that you do means so much to me. But these people go above and beyond, and it could be for a range of different reasons. It could be something as simple as a message of encouragement. It could be a guest recommendation. It could be a review somewhere online. It could be buying some merchandise from the online store. It could be shouting me a beer via the PayPal button over at andysocial.net. It doesn't matter. It all helps. It keeps this whole thing going, keeps me motivated, and just I really love when people are able to take a little bit of time just to, I guess, give me some feedback and a little bit of acknowledgement for this podcast, because I certainly love doing it, but it means so much more when I get that feedback from other people as well. So I know, guys, I crap on. This week's shout out is for Mark Robinson. Mark is from Kent in the UK. And would you believe it? I've never been to the UK. After all these years, Lord's never played there. Dungeon's never played there. And I've never actually traveled there. I've never had a holiday there. I have family from the UK who have come out here, but I've just never gotten around to go there. So I'd like to fix that very soon. And it just seems like one of those places which is just so familiar. And it's just really odd that I've never quite got there. So anyway, useless bit of information for you all. But Mark is from Kent in the UK. The reason why he's getting a shout out is Mark did a beer shout for me and flung me a few dollars just saying thanks for the great work. So, Mark, thank you so much for spending some of your hard-earned dollars by donating them to me and the podcast, and that will certainly go back into things such as hosting the website, gear, getting around town, reaching out to people, and getting more guests on the podcast. It keeps this whole thing moving. So, thank you so much, Mark. Please, when you hear this, shoot me a message with your details. I will find some stuff lying around at home. I'm going to shoot it across the seas to the UK, to Kent in the UK, and hopefully you'll get a kick out of what I'm going to send you. So, please shoot me a message when you hear this. But thank you so much, Mark. Really appreciate it. On the podcast this week, we have Shaun Farrugia. Oh, I probably butchered his surname. Sorry, Shaun. Shaun is the frontman of Melbourne thrash metal band In Malice's Wake. I'm a massive fan of the band. Lord's played with them quite a few times over the years, and Shaun and the guys are getting ready to put out a new album called, what's it called? I had it at the tip of my tongue. I'm not editing this. The Blindness of Faith. There we go. I got there. Good on you, Andy. They are, at the time of recording this, they are in production and recording the album, and will be due out, no doubt, probably later in 2019. But I caught up with Shaun and we had this really cool chat talking about the band over the years and how it's evolved, how they approach writing, him being a teacher. He's an art teacher at a primary school, I believe, and also his actual art. He has done the artwork for the majority of the In Malice's Wake album covers, and he is doing the new album as well. So we get into quite a bit of discussion around art and approaching it and how he approaches it himself. And it's just lots of cool stuff in here. Shaun's a great guy. I highly recommend you guys check out In Malice's Wake. I will dump a whole bunch of stuff in the show notes, put some video clips in there, and some easy links to listen to their music, Spotify links, all that sort of stuff. You can go to inmaliceswake.com. You can search for In Malice's Wake on Facebook and all the socials, but everything will be in the show notes. You guys know the drill. So enough of me. Please enjoy this really, really cool chat with you're almost there, Andy, with Shaun Farrugia of In Malice's Wake. Get into it. I feel really silly because you mentioned the other day or yesterday or whenever it was that you're an art teacher, and you've also done all the artwork for all the releases that you guys have put out except for the last album. And I had no idea. I just saw you as the guy in the band, or like one of the founding members of the band, and the guitarist and up the front and everything like that. But I didn't realize you had this extra element. And I'm sure like everybody that's listening that knows you and the band probably thinking, yeah, good one, Andy, you're dead shit. But I had no idea. So I guess maybe a really silly question, but what came first, the music or the art?
I think. Yeah, look, I've always been into art since I've been a little kid. It's just something I always did, while I was at high school or at university or whatever it was. I'd sort of be doodling, drawing, sci-fi scenes of death and destruction and all that. It's always been something I've really enjoyed. And I think music came a little bit later to me, but once I sort of got into that, they kind of meshed together. I just had the imagination of art and drawing and horror, science fiction, and the imagination that comes with music, and it just all sort of becomes one thing. So one thing I've always loved about being in the band, especially in Malice's Wake, which I've got freedom to do basically whatever I want, it's just having that full control over the package. And for me, there's the aesthetic of any band's just as important as music. I think no one does it better than Slayer do. They're the perfect blend of they look like Slayer visually through their cover art, through their even look at the back of the covers or their liner notes, or the artworks on the guitars, the backdrops. You look at the lyrics. It all comes together to make this thing that's greater than the sum of its parts. So I think for me, like having In Malice's Wake, it's always been something I've been able to channel just everything I've got creatively into one big thing. I get to work on lyrics that sort of, paint pictures using words, and then I get to try and capture that with the artworks, and then the music as well. Music these days is what comes first. It sort of the sound of a song, like the sound of a riff, usually gives me a bit of an idea of where to take it. But yeah, definitely, I would say artwork, to answer your question, was my first love, but it was followed by music, and music really overshadowed it for years. Once that had my hooks into me through the usual channel of Metallica, it really grabbed me and my imagination, and just wanted to be in a band and on stage. But more than that, I think I wanted to write music that excited me. And even now, the greatest thrill being in a band is just that moment where you finish. Or it's probably more when you get the seed of a song or even a riff or two that you're really excited about. It feels fresh to you, and it just takes you. It's still exciting. It doesn't ever go away. But yeah, to answer your question, definitely my art came first, and then my music. But the real pleasure is blending that all together to make one big entity, I guess, in the end.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think it's really cool. I mean, art's one of these things, and I've crapped on about it quite a bit in the past, but it's one of these things that I lack the patience and the discipline to try and even give it a shot. And when I was younger and a kid, you draw lots of crappy drawings and sketches and things like that. And I always had friends of mine that were really, or at least in comparison to me or in my eyes, were quite talented. And so I've always had this level of envy for anybody that's able to sit down and have that level of focus, and then over time build that skill to really put some amazing artwork together. And when I first started discovering music and I had that bug, and suddenly it's like, oh wow, like this whole new world opens up. I mean, I don't think I've got this stuff anymore. I think I turfed it, but I was like making up fake band names and trying to create really like dog shit artwork, sketching things out. Was that something that you did when you sort of started to really sort of get into music, before even you started getting a band together? Were you sort of, I don't know, were you fantasizing of what album artwork would look like and things like that?
Oh yeah, I think for me, I go back to maybe year 10. Look, I got into metal music in year 10, and from that point, I think the artwork's a huge part of what drew me in. And I had a mate in high school, Steve Sturgiadis, who currently plays in a band called Circadian Pulse, but he was also in Anarian for quite a while. But he had a band earlier than that called Nemaya, and they were just mates at high school, and they were doing a demo. So they asked me to design a logo. For me, that was the greatest thing ever. I've still got the original drawings. It was probably about the size of the palm of your hand, and it had all these tanks rolling over a hill of skulls, and there's a couple of helicopters up floating through the air. And like that was to be able to create the visual that goes with the music. It felt like a real privilege, and that really hasn't gone away. And I guess I'm talking to you now, and it sounds like I've got heaps of faith in what I do. And I think probably like most people who create, well, any type of art, music or visual, there's so much self-doubt that goes into it. But I think for me, more than that, if you look back at some of the early Malice's Wake artworks, the Black and Skies EP, especially the first Eternal Nightfall album, well, the artwork's not great. And we've had a whole bunch.
I was going to ask you who that old mate is on the cover of Eternal Nightfall.
Yeah, I really don't know. I remember at that point in time, I was really into the artwork of H.R. Geiger, who cool. I'm sure everyone knows, created the Alien and does all his amazing artwork. But at the time, I'd read a few pieces on him, and he was an airbrush artist, so didn't use brushes hardly at all. It was all through this tool with the airbrush, and I was like, wow, that's really cool. And I found a night school, and so I went away and learned how to airbrush. And airbrush is an amazing tool. You can change the focus, you can blur things, you can sharpen things up. It's got a lot of positives, and I got really good at copying whatever I saw. Photorealistic portraits and all that I was quite good at. And but then the whole point of it was I wanted to create our own original covers, and that was really my first attempt at doing an artwork where I wasn't just copying an image, and it was my own sort of composition. And I think to look at it, you can really tell that's our first one, my first one that I created. It's not great, but the second one, the Thrashing, looks a lot better than that. Our release that I'm most proud of the artwork for is Visions of Live Destruction, which is a live album we did, and I was really happy with the way that one came out. But over the past year, I've switched to learning how to oil paint. So for our newest one, I've really done heaps of groundwork, and I've got the concept, got the images, and now that we're pretty much finished writing everything, and Mark's about to go and record the drums, I get to spend a bit of time. Once the lyrics are done as well, I'll sit in there and start trying to piece this together. I've had a bit of success with the oil paint brush. Really love the way it works, and I think where I've always lacked more than anything is putting the time in first to create really good compositions. Doing 50 different versions of this thing, trying to get the lighting right, the different tones. But then I'm always in a real rush to just start a good copy and just get it done. So it's so exciting, but I think that's always been my biggest downfall, is really putting that development time in. And this is the first time I've done, I don't know how many different versions and practice pieces of this image we're about to do, and about to set up reference photos, get the lighting right, and I'm really excited to put it down. A bit nervous, like it's I've been showing the guys all these sketches, they love them, but I think it's always nerve-wracking until you're about halfway through and you can see the end and you're excited that it's going well. Starting anything new, you're always like, Jesus, how's this going to turn out? I hope it's enjoyable. I hope it's not a nightmare after that fix. But I'm sure that's very common for anyone doing any type of creative thing.
I was going to say, like anybody, you're always your worst critic or your hardest critic, and so there's always that level of pressure that you put on yourself. But I think for you, you're the artist in more than one sense. You're obviously contributing musically to the album and putting all of that together, but then you're also creating the visual aspect as well, and sort of really sort of championing that yourself. So, I mean, for us, anyone that plays music, you sort of, especially when you first start out, but even years later, you still have the same feelings of when you put new music out there. There's a level of vulnerability, and you sort of you're waiting for the criticism or the feedback, and you're sitting there raw, pretending that nothing's gonna penetrate your feelings or anything like that. But to put it out visually as well with your artwork, it's just it's another thing altogether. So it's there's a lot of respect there. I mean, I think it's a big thing to do, and the level of patience that's involved in any form of creative endeavors is something to be commended. But artwork is, I don't know, maybe it's just from my perspective and just being this frustrated wannabe. Well, it's not even a wannabe artist because I don't even bother to practice, but it's in my head. I was like, I'd love to do that one day. So man,
cool. I don't know, like I've been doing it for so many years and I still feel like a frustrated wannabe. It's I think people that end up doing art professionally just sort of push past that feeling of I'm no good at this, and eventually you get what looks to be good at this to other people, even if you're always questioning what you're doing. I'm sort of lucky. The guys are always really encouraging. They always give me heaps of freedom. They've often got really good ideas to bounce off. But my wife Alison, she's also a really great painter as well, and she's really brutally honest. Like I spent, I don't know how many weeks doing the first version of this thing, and she said, well, this is just not working, that's not working. And you never want to hear it. It's always crushing when you've spent time on something, but then sort of went away, a week later came back and looked at it again, and I'm like, you were right. And then it's looking so much better as a result of having some honest criticism. But it's totally, what you're saying is totally true. Like whenever I remember we put the last one out, Light Up on the Wicked, it was the first new album that we'd put out in so long. I think it had been a 4, maybe 5 year gap from the one before it. And, everyone likes to pretend they just do it for themselves and they don't care what anyone else thinks. And we all do these things for ourselves, but you want it to be well received. You want it to be respected, and you want people to sort of get what you were trying to get across, I guess, with the vision of it. And I find the people you want to impress the most are the ones that have loved your previous work. And if you've got someone that's been a really big fan of everything that you've done, you don't you want to, I guess, not let them down, and you want them to love what you're doing. You can't let that guide what you do, and you can't let that, you don't want to write things with those people in mind. But I think when you go put it out, you do hope everyone loves it and everyone's as excited as you are about what you're putting out. It's it's a tough one.
It's I mean, years gone by, especially when I sort of, Lord sort of kicked off as a proper band, and so I jumped on the ranks, and we put out the first album as Lord, and so I was still getting introduced to a lot of the old school Dungeon fans, and so we had people going, "Oh yeah, it's not bad, but it's not Dungeon, or it's not the last Dungeon release, or whatever it was." And it's like, okay, no worries. And for me, it didn't matter as much because I don't know, it might be a bit weird because if anything, I should have been more hypersensitive then because it's so new to me. But it sort of just rolled off my back. But what you said is I can definitely share the same feelings, because over time you start to build that community of people that are really close to the band and support everything you do. They love what you do. And so when we started to release the follow-up albums, you would start to get comments where it's these little comments. It wasn't anything horrible, but it was just like, oh yeah, no, it's really good, but I love the other one better, like the previous album, or oh, that one song, yeah, not. And so suddenly like, oh, like and you, as you said, you don't write with the expectation of anybody in particular liking it, but you do hope that those people continue to move along with you and like the things that you put out. And even now, like we're sitting on an album that we're well, I won't get into that, but we're almost we're almost ready to release it. And I'm listening to this stuff, and we've been listening to this stuff for so long, and that we're so familiar with the music and really excited about it. But you start to get this false sense of security around it, where you're so used to the songs, you think they're probably more catchy than what they might be to somebody else, and then you put it out there and you're expecting somebody to be as hyped up as you are because you've just been totally immersed in it, and then people are like, oh yeah, it's not bad, and you're like, oh.
Yeah, it can be really deflating, man. It's I know, because we're very much into the writing process at the moment, that it's for me, whenever you hear the next iteration of the way it goes, because they start as riffs and then they become full songs on just the guitar for us, and then I'll go into the room with Mark and he'll put his drums over it, and he sort of writes with what I wanted in mind, but he put his own spin on it, and then I'll go back, listen to the rehearsal tapes, and then it always takes me a listen or two before the version that was in my head merges with this version that Mark's put down. And it's like, hang on, that's it's different. I'm hearing it different now, but I put them on recently and I hadn't listened to it for a week, and I just got so buzzed by what he was doing. But it takes that time before it solidifies in someone's mind as that's how the song goes. And I think by the time you finish doing all your different versions, you've added your vocals, the subtleties of the bass line underneath are really shining through, backing vocals are there, the different lines of leads all there. It's so intimately familiar to you and the other guys in the band, but then to show somebody for the first time hearing that fresh, it's they probably miss a lot of that. It takes repeated listens, and I guess that's those albums that are real growers. It's you end up uncovering those layers through repeated listens and giving it time to settle. It's and also you lose perspective because you hear it so many times, and I start to. If I've been working on a single song for 2-3 weeks, whatever, I start to question, is this actually any good? It was something I was really excited about it initially, but it might just be shit, and I think you need that distance or a fresh set of ears, to really sort of zero back in on whether or not it's good. And sometimes you come back and it's really exciting once you've had that break. It's like, wow, this really is great. And then other times I've been through so many of I always, I don't know if you guys are the same, but I do most of my initial ideas just on the phone, just recording all these little bits and pieces. But I've come back to so much of it and it's just, well, I'm never using that dog shit riff, so I'll just delete it, it's, and that'll be 8 out of 10, the shit filter's set pretty high. Like we, get rid of way more than we keep. But yeah, it's that fresh perspective really changes the way you listen to something.
It's we have the same sort of thing. I mean, we have to distance ourselves even from when we're slapping together a first demo, and we Tim makes a big point to the rest of us, especially if it's one of his songs that he's sort of crafted and hasn't sort of shown us before, and it sits there and we listen to the demo over and over, and he's like, don't get married to it because things will change over time. And so for me, like I remember years and years ago, there was like a particular song, and I was obsessed with it. I just absolutely loved it. It had just all the little nuances in the song. This is a demo,
Yeah.
but I just absolutely, like, my imagination was going crazy with it. And then when we actually started tracking it and putting it together, some of these little things in there that I'd absolutely just become attached to weren't there anymore. And
Yeah.
I'm like, what's happened? This song's gone. And so then I had to relearn the song again. And then I realized that final version was still much better than the original demo, even
Yeah.
without those things that had changed. But because you're almost programming your mind to like something, to be totally familiar with something, and it becomes a little bit obsessive. So you do need that distance to be able to go, I acknowledge what it is. I've got it in my head to a degree, but I need to move away from it while we continue to work on that and everything else.
Yeah, that's true. And it can be really hard, I think, whenever, I guess it's a song that's your song, or, Lee often brings his own in. If the other guys all fall in love with a certain section or a certain bit, and you've got something is better, but it's different to what was there, and then you got to sort of sell that, and everyone's got to be on the same page. It's people really do get attached to certain parts of certain songs, and I guess everyone hears things differently and are excited by different things, and that's the glorious magic of music, that we all bring our own interpretation to whatever you're listening to, and it's just, people latch on to so many different things too, and I think we're all we're just so excited and passionate about it. So when someone's changing up something in your imagination, you're just hearing how great this be, and how many people might love it for that reason. It can be very hard to let go of something.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, going back to the art thing as well, it's the same sort of concept with that. I mean, for the person creating it, but also the person, I mean, for us, like, we'll have an idea of what we want, and we'll pitch the idea and explain the concept to somebody who's going to do it for us. And Tim might slap together a bunch of random images to try and give that person a little bit of a visual as to roughly what we're thinking, and then it's up to them to have the creative license to be able to put something together. But what you have in your head, especially when words are used and described, and then whatever's come out after that can be very different. So when we first start getting those drafts back and we're looking at the artwork, and we're like, ugh, and and for us, like, especially for me, I always make sure that whatever comes back, I either, whether it's music or art or whatever it is, I look at it or I listen to it, I walk away and I let it sit for a while, and then I'll come back and give feedback, because especially if we've been thinking about something for so long and just borderline obsessing about something, then we tend to sort of react really quickly and give probably unfair criticism to something when we're not looking at it from all angles. So it's it's the same sort of deal.
That's so true, and it's very important, like you say, to sort of take away, sort of move away from it, and just and really process it, because it does take time. And some of your favorite albums probably you listened to and didn't enjoy that much. For me, actually, Somewhere in Time, Iron Maiden, took ages for me to sort of really latch onto, and some people were telling me how great it was, and I love Peace of Mind. But Somewhere in Time, the chorus has always sounded weird, and that's become one of my favorites now. And I think once you learn how the songs go and those parts, they're coming, and just all the subtleties start to make sense. It's really important to give things time and space. But it's interesting to hear you talking about artwork in that sort of respect. Someone, from the words, because I had the same experience for our last one, Light Upon the Wicked. We got a great artist, Nick Keller, who has done a lot of really great album covers, Beast Wars, Disentomb, Black Dahlia Murder. I've loved his work for a really long time. He's also worked at the Weta Workshop that did a lot of the Lord of the Rings set design and things like that. Okay. So he's someone that I'd followed for ages and just love the look of it. And album art for me had been so important for so long, and I especially at the time didn't have too much faith in my ability to create really great original compositions, but I was also really excited about the idea of seeing what someone could do with my ideas as a concept, and just working with a great artist. So that was a really fascinating insight for me from the other side, because I sort of gave Nick the concept just about the idea of this almost what would you call it, like a cleansing light that was bursting through to wipe away the ugliness of humanity, and the light at the same time would be illuminating these dark shadows, so you'd see the true ugliness of humanity. That was sort of the concept of our last album. And it was cool because we sort of went back and forth quite a bit before there was any images involved at all, just talking about the look and the feel of it. And we wanted to be quite biblical in feel, and he's an oil painter, and it has that sort of a timeless character that I was really after. But just, there's so many questions that come back and forth. Well, will there be buildings in the background? Is this the Roman time? And for me, I just wanted the characters to be almost not clothed at all, and just to have this it's the essence of humanity. It's like this biblical feel, like they're almost like naked and wicked. And yeah, so he went back and forth. We just talked about it for a while, and it was great. He was really communicative, just really, really descriptive about what he was picturing. And I think between that and then him sending me through a few example artworks, he sent through some paintings by a guy called John Martin, who's one of my all-time favorite ones, and one of his favorites too. And I think once he'd sent those ones and said, well, this is what I'm thinking, and it just matched perfectly what I had in my head, I just was filled with all this faith and really excited about what he was going to create. And then from there, he sort of did a few really rough sketches, a few sort of computer layouts, and it was cool for me because I'd had this picture in my head of how I thought it would look, but the composition, the way it was sort of the scene, the angle that you saw it from, the way it looked, where the light was coming from, was all completely different to what I pictured in my head. But like you said, I sort of went away for an hour or two, or a day, and just like, yeah, I absolutely love it. Go with that. I think for an artist, if they've put out this initial thing and feel like they've nailed it, it really fills you with a lot of confidence. And I wasn't trying to instill that in Nick. I just really genuinely loved what he'd presented at first. And yeah, so from there he sent us a bunch of different computer designs and tested out different colors and said, what do you think of this and that? When we were choosing between like a sort of very red hellfire kind of look or this cold blue light, and we ended up really liking that sort of cold, sterile, singeing light. And then yeah, he just sent us a bunch of progress photos. I just remember being just like a kid waiting for Christmas and seeing this come together bit by bit. So it was really nice to be on the other side of that, having someone creating art for us, and it was a really, really positive process. And I really love the artwork, and I know he's got it in his collection, and something I'd really love to buy from him at one point. But yeah, I've never seen it in person. It's I think it's in his studio in New Zealand. So yeah, but it was really, really enjoyable process, and I'm really glad we went through him to do that. And I think if I wasn't going to attempt it myself this time, we definitely would have hit him up again, because he's really great. And I guess also the same token with that, I've got to follow up this amazing artwork. So I'm taking this punt on my abilities. I've not created artworks the same level he has, and it's not even something that needs to be compared, but it needs to be good, because the last one was just such a visually appealing thing. Like, I loved it. It really nailed the aesthetic and that primitive evil feeling of that album. And this one, we're turning the darkness and the evil up just a notch forward. And I think this cover image is going to work really well. I've got the design. I've got to get the references now and just sit down and paint the bloody thing. And I'm really excited. I'm hoping it comes out like I've envisaged.
Was there at any stage in those early discussions with Nick, with the last album, where you may have felt tempted to try and sketch something for him, or was there never even that thought in your head, whereas because he'd already had a reputation and had examples of his work, that was more of a case of it was better for you just to put that into words rather than you making an attempt to try and guide him visually or throw his vision off or anything like that?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So I guess it was a temptation because I had a visual image in my head, but I sort of talked to myself a bit and thought, well, part of the reason I'm getting this guy on board is he's got such great vision, and I think if I send something through, it's going to colour what he would imagine with what I'm sending him. It's very hard to unsee something once it's been sent through, and you know, that temptation to just get locked in, and you want to make your client happy. And yeah, I deliberately didn't do that, and just let him sort of go, because I mean there's so much. The artist doesn't just make you a painting; it's the placement of all the objects. It's where the light's sort of coming from, where how the colors react with each other, and he's been doing that for so long, and it's such a skill that you acquire. And so really, I just thought, well, I've got a proper professional in my hands. I really want to leave that with him, and I don't want to colour what he's going to create with my vision of it. Even though it's my original vision, the whole point of getting an artist like Nick on board is you want their interpretation, I guess, of what you've imagined. And and that's what we got, and it was awesome.
I mean, you mentioned right at the beginning about artwork and albums having that identity, and obviously the music's a critical element, but the visual is just, it's part of that package. It's that overall feel and tone that you're setting, that it has to sell for people. It has to sell a concept to people before they listen. And I think you'll be the same as me. When you first get into music, and I think you mentioned this already, but you get drawn to artwork, and when you see an album in front of you, whether it be Slayer or Metallica or anything like that, the artwork is something that you go, wow, this is really interesting. And I think this is part of why Maiden have been so successful over the years. I mean, the music's amazing, but their artwork was just next level. And I think that brought in a lot of people straight away to the cool factor. And if anything, for people that were not even used to listening to any form of sort of harder music, probably almost convinced themselves to start liking the music because the artwork was so cool. And it was it's such a massive thing that I think probably up until recently, and I've seen a bit of a shift, but over probably the last 10 or 15 years, artwork's become this thing that's almost, it's a necessary evil, and not a lot of impact or not a lot of focus has been put on it, because I think people started to freak out when everything went digital and people weren't buying music anymore. And so then I think people started to not respect the visual element of music. And it's only been like recently where like the guy that you used, and I have seen his other artwork, and I think it's the guy from the band just toured here last year. The guy from Bell Witch.
I don't know Bell Witch. I don't know their music at all, but his that Bell Witch cover with the mirror and the apparition coming through, that is my desktop on my work computer. All my students see that. I haven't even heard the CD. I just love that artwork so much, man. It's
so good. It is so good. I think
it's so good.
I'm pretty sure, and someone who's probably a Bell Witch fan is probably going to lash out at me, but I'm pretty sure it's the guitarist's. I'm pretty sure the guitarist did the artwork.
Yeah, well.
Oh, no, sorry. No, I'm way off. No, so I don't know where I got that from. Because I quickly looked it up now, but there's two guys from Poland. So the guy who did this is from Poland, but he is inspired by another guy, Basinski or something like that, who was really
his work.
Yeah, and I think he was murdered a few years ago or something like that. So
was he?
Yeah, but there's another guy now and I think his surname, I'm so shitty with surnames, but it's like Lewansky or something like that. Anyway, so he did that Bell Witch artwork, and I love it. So surreal and it's just otherworldly, and that artwork is incredible. But I've seen a lot of bands pick that back up now and start to really get inspired by oil painting and a lot of really intricate artwork, and putting a lot more importance back on the visual aspect, because for years it was just so much CGI rubbish. There was just stuff slapped together at the last minute, and it was just like, you can tell that they dialed that one in for that release. And it's refreshing to see people putting a little bit more emphasis on it now.
I totally agree, and you're right. There's been a real resurgence in just the effort and the I guess even the money that's put into like proper professional artists really coming up with something cool. Like for me, I think whenever a band is going to do a release, as much as the album is huge, the most important thing, that announcement where they reveal the artwork, it always excites me. I remember Testament revealed the Dark Roots of Earth artwork, and that was probably the best artwork they've ever had. Wouldn't say it was their best album they ever had. It was solid, but that artwork, which is by Ella and Cantor, who's been doing all these amazing bands. Like he's what's he done? He's done Incantation. Geez, they slipped me Crisian. He's had one done recently, even latest Soulfly, and they're just like this. Oh, of course, the last Bloodbath as well, which is my favorite album last year.
Okay. Yeah.
Just these really incredible, like beautiful, evocative artworks, and it's not just his work. There's just so many great artists that it's really cool to see that union of metal bands and just real high quality art that makes you feel a certain way. It gives the CD a real atmosphere, and you almost picture what the thing's going to sound like before you hear it. And then I guess, yeah, once you got that blend of those two things together, if they come together right, it's just, yeah, it's so strong, it's so powerful. There was a real dead spot, I think, I don't know if it was the early 2000s, where there was just all these sort of digital, there's a lot of amazing digital art, but there was that kind of digital art where it'd be a few photos slapped together, that would be colored to sort of match, and it just had this, this real sterile, forgettable, you're never going to see that thing hanging up as a piece on its own. It's just to service this album, but it's it's not something to get excited about. But all these amazing artworks from the early era, like you say, it just really draws you in. And I think, especially back then, where you couldn't hear the music first, artwork is, I wouldn't say any more important than it is now, but it really was that first most important thing to get people in initially. You'd see a cover and want to hear what it sounded like beforehand. For me, I'd like some of those early Morbid Angel ones. Is like, what is this thing going to sound like? And then you put it on, and it sounds like from the other side of hell. I
was going to say, it sounds exactly like it looks.
yeah, and that's just so exciting. And it's I don't know. You never really grow out of that. It just pulls you in. It's this intrigue. And my favorite ones of all time still are, I think, those classic Sepultura ones. The Beneath the Remains and Arise, and even Chaos OD, those three artworks. The artist's name's Michael Whalen, who mostly does real sort of fantasy stuff, like a lot of book covers and things like that. But those three albums, they're just timeless images, and he's also responsible for Obituary's Cause of Death, and it's just it's just so cool, man. I've spent so many hours just looking through different artworks. The internet's so great for that. You can find an artist that's done this thing, and then you can go on their website. You can look at all this other cool shit they've done. There's usually a link to another artist, and it's just it's a real rabbit hole of exciting, terrifying art.
Absolutely. And do you think this actually might sound a bit too woo-woo, but one thing that you sort of touched on, made me sort of think of it, where if you're seeing something visually, so you're looking at an album cover and you haven't had the chance to listen to it, and you're sort of almost trying to, I guess, get a feeling in your mind of what that music's going to sound like. Do you associate what's the best way of saying this? Without sounding ridiculous, do you associate sounds or anything with art or with colors and things like that, with tones? Like, so, as you said before, like when sort of reversing it a little bit, when you were getting the last album artwork done and you're looking at those palettes, those color palettes, when you're looking at a particular combination of colors from a music point of view, are you almost getting like a musical sort of feel or some sort of sound in your head? I mean, it's a very hard thing to sort of describe, so it's hard to answer.
It's a weird but really fascinating question, because I think I haven't really thought too much about it before, but I really think that you do. Like is trying to think of, I don't know, it's the Nile song, The Burning Pits of the Durat or whatever. That's always felt red to me. I'm just like picturing puffs of fire and smoke, these burning pits, and that's, I guess that does have a certain color association to it. And then there's, some of this triptychon stuff that's just completely black and dead. And I don't know, then there's a coldness. I always loved the Fear Factory's techie blue and purple demanufacture cover, because that does have that, even the way those real super triggered kicks and that sterile, just sharp as guitar sound. It's just, it does have the feeling of the way those album covers looked. And I don't know if I've ever really thought about it too much, but there was a reason why the blue of that last album felt more right to me than the red, and that could have just been it. It had that cold, eerie, that eerie darkness about it. And there's warm colors and there's cool colors, the way they interact. There's dark, there's light, there's shade. So yeah, I mean, those things are going to come together to form a picture in your mind. And I guess the picture in my mind will be different to yours and different to anybody else's. So yeah, I guess when it matches, it looks the way it sounds. It's a really cool thing that sort of clicks. But yeah, no, I think to consider it like that, it's yeah, definitely like Slayer's the color red, isn't it? It's if you look at their covers, yeah, all the way through those first ones. I'm not sure if I heard the music and then associated with red because of the covers, but they are such hellfire red, bloody, demonic sounding and looking albums, all the way through. There's the haunting face of the Seasons in the Abyss guy, and the I don't know, the weirdness, the abstract weirdness of Rain and Blood, and yeah,
the intro Hell Awaits,
yeah,
all that. Yeah, it's it definitely can create visuals, and then reversing it when you're seeing the visual first and then listening to the music just locks in exactly with what you're visualizing. Then you're on a winner. And it's not an easy thing to do either, because I mean, I reckon there's a lot I don't reckon, I know there's a lot of bands that don't execute well in that domain, because and it might just be a case of putting majority or all energy into the music, but then sort of it's a last minute decision about the artwork and going, oh well, just whatever we'll settle with, and we'll just roll the dice and see how it goes, and sometimes you just miss the mark.
I'm sort of a bit weird if I've got visuals or sort of something I've painted roughly. I'll sometimes put it up while I'm trying to write music, and it just it gets me in the mood. Or I'll put a certain film on in the background and then write the music in the dark, and it just I think you got to build that atmosphere in your mind to really get those magical riffs out every now and then. And yeah, if I've got something, the sketch that I've done that sort of evokes this kind of vibe about it, I'll put it up, and I'll sort of be playing guitar while that's up there. And sometimes that'll work with magic, and sometimes it'll be one of those dog shit riffs that I end up deleting on the phone, so it doesn't always work. But there is definitely that link there for
sure. Speaking of inspiration when you're writing and such, you did mention when we were speaking that just trying to get the album together and not having a lot of space, that you're actually doing some of that, whether it was writing or demoing or anything like that, at school in the art room. So I mean, how does that work, and how did you channel some dark inspiration when you're in an art room at school?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So, well, basically this year, not this year, sorry, last year I had my first boy, Finley is this absolute wonder. I love him to bits. He's awesome. But being a dad, you just have a lot less time, and on top of that, you can also not be turning your music up super loud, or really creating that vibe at home all the time, because he's where my sort of my studio is, or it's just a study with all the gear. It's right next door to his bedroom. We haven't got a huge house. But I've been lucky this year. It's my first job as an art teacher, and in my art room, I've got this storeroom there. So I've cleaned up that whole thing. I've got an old Marshall valve state, and this old just shitty SG that a mate sort of lent me. And so I get, if I wake up at 5 a.m, I can get there by say 6:30. Groundskeeper lets me in early. I'll make a coffee. And I'll have. It's just you value your space and time so much when you end up having kids. It's amazing, like how sort of free you feel when no one can disturb you. Because if someone comes into the art room, it's still dark in there. I don't turn the art room lights on. I don't want anyone to know I'm there. So I just have this little room within a room, and no one's there until say 8 o'clock when I'm supposed to be at work, and then I emerge from the little cave and get started with my day. But so I generally sort of just put some weird movie or something on, or just an eerie glow from the laptop, leave it dark in there, and I can turn it up pretty loud. And it's just I think probably from about mid this year, thought, geez, man, this end date's really coming up soon. And it's amazing how many riffs, and I think at least the last third of this album has come from riffs that have been written in that setup. And it's kind of cool. Like sometimes I go in there at lunchtime or recess, and like a school bell will come in over the top of this evil riff, or you hear the PA asking some kid come pick up his lunch order or whatever. So sometimes I have a bit of a chuckle if I listen back and hear some of that. But yeah, it's I've found this year, being a new dad, you just really got to find those scraps of time and make them work for you. So I'll do early mornings, I'll do sometimes late evenings, although if he wakes up, sometimes I've got to get involved. And I've never been a morning person before, but yeah, this year, just out of necessity, I mean, it's either that or you don't get a chance to write, you don't get a chance to do music. And I just love this so much. It's never really been an option, so I don't watch heaps of TV or whatever, except in the evenings now. But I wake up nice and early. I go to bed early, but I'm up 5:30 at least 2 or 3 times a week and do a session, and that's gotten so many results. It's been really exciting. And then I don't know, I've sort of, if I stumble upon a cool riff, or if I found a way to make a certain part of a song work, I've just got a real spring in my step for the rest of the day. It's you feel like really rich man when you come across something that's going to work for a song.
I think it's that feeling of being productive and sort of getting into the right headspace first thing in the day. Like there's so many cliches over the years that get drilled into your head, and they sort of go in one ear out the other, and you don't really sort of take notice of them until you start to experience them yourself. But getting up, for me, like the last few years, I moved out of Sydney and I'm down the south coast, but I do a lot of driving up and down the coast. And so for me to get up to Sydney, I'm going to have to be up around that time or a little bit earlier. And you're forced to do it because of circumstances, but you quickly start to appreciate how much time you actually have that you weren't using beforehand. And everything becomes so much more valuable, and you get so much more done because you're sort of forced to, like, I've got an hour here, and so I've got to make it count instead of like piss farting around and just mucking around with stuff, and you get a little bit of something done. You actually get the task done. So if you're doing things in the morning, regardless of whatever it is, but if you're getting that feeling of being productive and moving and getting momentum, then it's almost like the rest of the day becomes so much easier. Like it's almost like a cruise, because you're already in the right headspace, and so everything else becomes just that much easier to manage.
That's very true, and you don't feel that pressure to be productive for the rest of the day. You've already got that sort of part done, and you feel great, and it wouldn't be music every morning. Sometimes I go to the gym, or just to keep on top of whatever it is. Sometimes it'll be come in to do band promo, whatever it is. But it's amazing where you can find time. And it's amazing how much time we piss away before you really have to look at it. Like especially social media. Like you go to any shopping center or walk down any street, and people got their heads buried in their phones, and it just eats your time and gives you nothing in return. So I guess like now I try to do as little of that as possible. I still get on it quite a bit, more than I would like to, but you really don't realize how much time you just piss away doing that sort of thing. And in the evening I'll watch a episode of a show or something with my wife and really enjoy that, and then that's it. But I've found it amazing how much time you can carve out if you're sort of pressed and you've got priorities and things you really want to do and things you really want to achieve. So it's nice now because we're going into the studio in Feb to start the drums. Feb, I think it's the 18th, and we write just notoriously slowly. So from about mid-year, it's like, well, I need another 4 or 5 songs, and I've got down to about 1 song per month and a half. That's just guitars and basic drums, but that's very fast for us. It's to be able to put together, we've got 10 songs for this album. For that to have come together, it feels like we've sort of reached some kind of goal, or I don't know. It's very satisfying to be at this point, and now just wrapping things up.
It's I always am amazed at what people are able to achieve when they've got so many different things on the go. And especially when you sort of look to the the music gods out there who've carved out these amazing careers in music and do it full time, and they've
Mm.
toured the world and they've got a legacy, and a lot of us idolize these amazing musicians and what they've done. And but a lot of their circumstances, over the years have been, well, this is my full-time gig and this is what I do. So
Yeah.
when we're not touring, then we're writing, or we're writing on the road and we're in the studio when we get back. But and maybe it's just changing across the whole board these days. But for everybody else, it's, you got a day job, or
Yeah.
you got a wife, a partner, you got kids, you've got all these
Yeah.
commitments that need to happen, and you need to make sure that everything's attended to, and to them still be able to find time to actually create something
Yep.
that is creative, but to be able to do it in a way that, like, it's just very hard. You can't just say, well, today I'm going to write a great song, or I'm going to write an
No.
awesome riff. It just doesn't work like that. So even if you've got an
Yeah.
allocated piece of time, it's still a challenge. But I think the big thing with a lot of it, and I think this is probably what's helped you, just listening to what you said, is having that routine in place where you just keep showing up and just giving yourself a chance. And as you said, like 80% of what you're chucking into your phone might be crap, but
Yeah.
you wouldn't get the good stuff without churning out that crap first. So
Yeah,
it's
no,
sort of
that's
just showing up
totally
each
correct.
time.
Yeah, you just got to. I was talking to Lee, our guitarist Lee Bartley, about this the other day, and neither of us are the biggest Gene Simmons fans in the world, but he quoted old mate Gene and just said, I'm probably going to misquote, but it was something like Gene had said, that someone said to him, I'm just not, I don't sit down to write because I've got no ideas, and he sort of turned around and said the opposite. Well, you got no ideas because you don't sit down to write, and that's really true. Like it's really deflating when you sit down for a session. At the end of it, you've just got nothing, because that happens. It happens with, like we're talking about before, with drawings. You can just come up, and at the end of it, you've got something that's, it's a waste of time. But it's never a waste of time. You always learn something. Well, you know what? Actually, if I'm being completely honest, I've come up with some riffs where I haven't learned anything. It's just been me thrashing away at the guitar, and it's deflating. It just feels like a waste of time. But you have to do those wastes of time to stumble upon the ones that really are worthwhile. So you just got to slog it out. And I think most of creating a CD, probably, I don't know, 70% of the time is just slogging away, unglamorously, just trying to come up with riffs that are cool or song parts that are cool, and failing. And then once you've got songs that you are really proud of, you get to put them together and bring them to life in the studio and put lyrics to them. And but yeah, there's so much time that goes into just coming up with those initial ones. And I think, I don't know, like, I think of my favorite bands, and there's a temptation to just assume that they pick up a guitar and the gold just spews out from the from the hands. But I really doubt that's the case for anybody. I think everyone just got to sit there and just churn it out till something comes out that's worth listening to.
If anything, it's probably harder for those bands that have the luxury of time, not so much time, but don't have the multiple commitments in every direction, where they have to really be conscious about ensuring they're balanced with where their attention's going, because it becomes too relaxed, where it's hard to create discipline, because there's so many things that you can do if you wish. And so it's hard to sort of just keep showing up and creating the discipline that puts you in a position where you're starting to actually churn out some good stuff. So if anything, it's sort of like, adversity creates I don't know, whatever, success or whatever it might be. And being restricted and having limitations put on you can probably actually be a real advantage.
Yeah, I totally agree. It's like you say, when you've got a deadline. I've worked a lot harder the last half of last year than the first half, because it's sort of, well, this is looming. And I've always thought of myself as someone that works better without pressure, but I'm not so sure that's true. It's when you are put in a position where you really have to make things work, you still don't accept any of the shit, and you only take the goal, but you just work harder, I think, to produce that gold, and you show up more often and you put more time in. And it's like you're saying, it's difficult as well, because all of us in the band, we don't I think we've always been in Malice's wake, or maybe not always. These days we are very much a slow burning band. I want to still be doing this by the time I'm 60, 70, however long my hands can still play these riffs. I want to do it for a really long time, and depending on family life, whatever it goes, it might not be huge levels of touring. It hasn't been up to this point, but where the opportunities arise, we'll take them. But I want it to be sustainable. This can't be something that our partners hate us for being a part of. This can't be something where we don't get to see our kids. We've got 5 of them between us now. That's important, and it's something that the band is hugely important to us. I would really struggle to imagine life without having this thing to channel my creative energy into. I really love it. Fills me with all this joy and excitement. It's just the greatest. But also it can't be everything, because there's so much else, that there is to enjoy in life. And it's got to be one of many really exciting things. And I want it to be around for a really long time. So, we've had things come up where guys can't make it, can't make it to this rehearsal. In fact, we've had most of our sessions writing this last half, it's been just me and Mark putting our songs together, and then just Mark and Lee working on his, and Carl's been working, evenings, and he can't make this rehearsal and that. So I think we all know how it is, and we all have dedication to this band, but we all understand. And it's I think for that reason, that level of understanding and knowing that deep down we've got this commitment to what we're doing, it allows us to sort of flow with whatever adversity is coming up at the time. And fingers crossed that it will allow us to do this for a really, really long time. Our albums are a little bit further between than many bands. Like we're, I don't know, averaging one every 4 years at the moment or thereabouts. But for me, if I can pump out another 10 albums at that rate, I'm fine with it. It's as long as they're good, they've just got to be quality. It's got to be something I'm enjoying, and it's got to still excite me. And to this point, it really, really does.
It's a healthy way of looking at it, because, and I've spoken about this ad nauseum in the past, but I think a lot of bands, and I've certainly been guilty, and maybe we as a band have been guilty, where the pressure that we put on ourselves is to attain a certain level of success, and that in our heads is doing either big tours, big shows, or getting certain types of accolades or recognition along the way. And I think we've certainly changed over the years, but I think when you really sort of appreciate what you are doing, and in the grand scheme of things, it's pretty unique compared to the average person out there. And the fact that you're able to do something where you can create art in the general sense, and it's more or less timeless. Once it's out there, it's out there. And it's like us, when we were growing up and discovering bands, and those bands were already probably 10, 15, 20 years old. And even today, I'm still discovering music that was, created long before I was even a thought. And it just sort of, it's all the heavy commitments, finances and things like that usually make a band crumble, really don't matter in the grand scheme of things. They're things that get forgotten really quickly as people move on and dissipate, and another generation of people come along. They don't really know a lot about what you did each year, where you went, how many shows you did, who rocked up to those shows. They're looking at the music that actually has lasted and is still existing out there. And I think if you're really sort of thankful and appreciative of what you're doing and enjoying it along the way, then it's such a healthy way to look at it. And I think a lot of bands struggle and just break up because the focus is in the wrong areas.
Yeah, I totally agree. It's really ringing a lot of bells what you said, and for me, more than anything else, excuse me, it's the releases really are what stay at the end of it all. And there's two things I really enjoy especially. I mean, I find myself just enjoying the small moments these days. I actually had a thought in my head. I don't know if you're talking to, if it was Riley from Desecrator about enjoying, being present in what you're doing, or maybe it was Chris about, chasing success, Christopher Morpheus.
Yeah.
But I found myself at rehearsal the other night, and we were getting ready. We got the Voivod show on Friday, and I was just like, well, I'm in a room, I'm jamming out these songs with a bunch of really good friends. You know, I won't be doing this in 80 years. I'll be dead. But right now, you know, it's an enjoyable thing. It's only rehearsal. We're only practicing for this show. It's not even the real thing. But I get to, you know, really just get to feel the guitar playing. I get to hear the sound of my amp. I get to really put my heart into my vocals, and it just felt really good. And I think just in that moment, it made me really happy, and I was able to appreciate it for what it was, which is a pretty cool thing. But beyond that, we love playing live. It's the funnest part. It's where you get to connect with your audience. It's at the end of a live show that's gone well, there's like, you wake up the next day just feeling on top of the world. But also, you know, I don't remember every single show that we've ever played. You know, I remember the highlights. I remember the real good ones. I remember some real shit ones. They're all fond memories. They're all part of our, you know, our memories of live shows are so important. But for me, more than that, it's the releases and the songs are what are timeless. And that's a whole package. That's the lyrics. That's the cover art. That is the songs themselves. There's, you know, it might be, I don't know, vain to think of, but this is stuff that could be listened to by people once I'm no longer around. You know, it could stand the test of time. Who knows? I'm sure there's heaps of music that's going to get forgotten, you know, as quickly as it was created, and ours could be included in that too. But it does have the opportunity to be timeless, and there's so many musicians that are no longer with, enjoy their music as if they were still alive, and yeah, there's just something really special about the package of each album. Whatever it is, they're really important, special things, and those albums that you really love, they're just so cool. You know, it's so the opportunity to create an album, it's a real privilege, and I'm really excited going into that process again now, to put another one together. And it's always a little bit nerve-wracking, like, is this going to be good? But I think, you know, you sort of set your shit filter high, and really put some love into it, and it's always going to be on some level, you know, strong, and people will get something out of that.
I saw a post that you put up on Facebook, or one of the guys in the band put up on Facebook on New Year's Eve, and you sort of just did a bit of a wrap-up post for the year, but and you spoke about what was going to happen in 2019 this year, but you had a working title for the album. Is that still the working title, or is it shifted a bit?
No, that's still our working title, which is The Blindness of Faith, and I'm feeling really good about it. Yeah, so it's The Blindness of Faith. I would really like the idea, and more than just a single track, we've almost themed the whole album around the concept of, you know, I guess any type of faith is a leap of faith. It's something that's blind, and I've tried to make it a semi-intelligent, you know, dissection of religion and all of the issues that arise from people believing in things that, you know, if it's something you need to have faith in, well, it's because there's not sufficient evidence. And, you know, there's all sorts of different faiths, and a lot of people subscribe to all sorts of different ones. But I think as a result, we've got so many things wrong with the world, and sort of sat down the last couple of weeks to really pull that apart, and liked the idea of just having a different focus on each song, but all tying with this idea of issues. Like, we've got issues relating to faith. We've got, you know, incompatibility of different faiths where you can, you know, only subscribe to one single God, or, you know, how does that work out in the grand scheme of things, especially if your faith identifies people of other faiths as enemies. There's stories of, you know, Abraham and God, and, you know, him telling him he needs to sacrifice his son Isaac, and then goes to do it, and well, all of a sudden that's you know, that's just needed to prove your faith. You know, you don't have to actually burn him, and, you know, there's these holy texts and all that people really take as the basis of their faith. They're just so flawed, and there's so much in them if you really read all the passages. And I like the idea of exploring that, trying to look at it from from a perspective beyond, the demons and the ghouls and the, comical hell. The blindness of faith felt like something we could explore. There was a lot of that kind of lyrical theming in Light Upon the Wicked. But I think with this one, we're not finished with it. But I like the idea of really putting out 10 songs where that is the theme and they all look at a different area. And I've just been doing a lot of reading on different history, looking at, the Inquisition, Crusades, a whole bunch of really great podcasts as well that we've been checking into. It's been a lot of, it's been very interesting to explore. And it just really, suits the intensity and the darkness of the music. And I think there's something about the whole feeling of biblical destruction and just the darker side of humanity and the way religion can often really whip that into a frenzy and pit people against each other who really, in all other ways except for their faiths, are very similar and essentially very good and not wanting to hurt other people. There's been a lot of horrible things done in the name of religion through history, and exploring that's been really interesting. And I know it's something that Lee's really interested in as well. So we've been chatting quite a bit just about those concepts. And there's a lot of things about religion that works as well, and it's there's a lot in there where it's there's positive aspects.
There's definitely, and this is something that I've had to come to terms with over the years, because I've sort of grown up a real bitter kid, getting dragged along to church and things like that, growing up, and I certainly rebelled away from a lot of that, and being quite bitter with just the whole concept of it all, and just very judgmental about it. And I think in more recent times, still very critical of it all, but I think there are definitely positives in certain aspects around, I guess, basic human needs that people require around, things such as community, etc. So, and I think it's probably a more balanced way of discussing or having conversations that are constructive, where I think, and I might be putting words in your mouth, but I think a lot of people out there now that want to highlight the concerns about religion, and even extending that to different types of faith, is that you want to do it in a way that actually brings awareness to the people that are swept up in it. And by just telling people that they're stupid, they're wrong, it's it's dumb and whatever it is, the basic the natural human instinct is for people to tell you where to go and to repel away from you. So you're not going to convince anybody. So when you've got a bit of perspective and you can say, look, these are the benefits, or you can appreciate why people make the decisions that they do to do certain things or be with certain communities, then I think you've got a foot in the door to then have a better conversation that might bring some awareness. And it's kind of vice versa. I mean, for other people on the other side of the fence, to be able to show perspective and a bit of compassion to understand why somebody thinks differently to them as well. But it's a hot topic, and I was going to say it's very timely for you guys to put an album out like this. But to be honest, and you mentioned it before, this has been something that's been going on for centuries, so it's not. It's always timely.
Yeah, it always is, absolutely. And I was raised a Catholic Christian as well, and I think part of it is you just adopt the religion of your parents, and if you think about it like that, everyone has is raised in the same religion as their parents, and if the teachings are true and you've been dealt the hand, and your Christian God is not actually the true God, and you end up in hell for it. It just doesn't add up to me. And but I think coming from that perspective, I know a little bit about it, and I know what it's like to be raised in that sort of thing, and I absolutely know that there's a lot of positives to be gained from religion, especially as far as the community goes. But yeah, and I think you're totally right. If you just tell people that what they believe is bullshit, you're not going to win anybody over. And I think also for us, it's not really, we don't have any mission statement like that. We're not out to destroy religion or anything like that. It's never been something we've been about. but it has been an interesting topic to explore, and and just something to that historically what's gone on. You know, what are the incompatibilities? Where, you know, are the stories contradicting themselves? It's for me, it's provided quite a lot of religious, lyrical. The way they've worked together have been very interesting, and and I certainly don't have any issues with people of faith myself. It's I've got quite a few really good friends that are religious, and it's and I was in my early years. It's so I totally get it, and I think the whole idea of everyone being inherently good as a starting point is really important, because everyone wants to be a good person. I don't think there's people out there that want to cause harm to anybody else, and I guess the whole point of what this is a lot of people that get mixed up with a lot of very ancient and what seem to be very misguided texts, and that is a big problem, especially when it leads to violence because of your beliefs. And I think that's a big issue, and and that's a reoccurring theme in what we're putting together for this album.
Yeah, and I think there's been a lot of people that have spoken about, the common traits that sort of carry across different cultures and backgrounds, religions and beliefs, etc. And it's the basic survival instincts, or survival needs. We all need shelter, we need food and water, and we need a form of community and interaction with other human beings. And then for anybody that sort of gravitates off that baseline will go in a whole range of different directions, but ultimately anybody that will make decisions that negatively impact others, and putting aside any form of disease or mental health issues or anything like that. A lot of it is the feeling of a direct threat to those basic survival needs, and it's the threat of family, food, water, shelter being compromised in some sort of way, whether it be directly or an indirect underlying level of anxiety and stress that if you don't do particular things, then eventually these things will be compromised, and then that results in bad behavior. And so but it all stems back to those basic needs.
Yeah, and we are all very similar. It's we have a lot more in common. People of cross faiths have a lot more in common with each other than differences. It's and I think if it doesn't impact anybody else, it's faith can be a really beautiful thing. You can believe whatever you like. You can that's fine. But it's there's not enough grounds, not enough evidence where your beliefs should be able to encroach on anybody else's way of living, I don't think. And there's no real excuse for any of the violence that's happened over centuries that has been carried out on the grounds of belief. There's not enough solid evidence there to believe anything enough where you would go to hurt somebody else because of your beliefs or because you feel affronted. It's there shouldn't be that much conviction on something that is based on faith, I don't think.
That's right. But even with following doctrine or any form of faith, it's ultimately creating some form of fear or some sort of attack on those basic needs. Whether it be something that's immediate or something that creates a feeling of doubt in the mind that if certain things aren't followed, then at some point, somewhere, sometime down the track, that the consequences will be there and they will impact those things that mean the most to you. So that's when people become obsessed over doctrine and rules and those and
paths. It becomes very guided by fear. Then I don't think that's the basis of anything positive, and shouldn't do good out of fear of hell or any of those sorts of things. It's just it doesn't add up for me.
For sure. Well, I I'm always excited to hear new music from you guys, and big fan of. And we've played a bunch of shows over the years, and one of the best thrash bands in this country. But even
Thanks,
after
man.
speaking today, and getting a little bit of the context behind what the songs are about, and especially the artwork, which is really really cool, and just I guess hearing a bit of how you approach it and what you've done in the past, it just. And it's like anything, we talked about the complete package. Even you giving context and a bit of background behind it sort of adds to that complete package. So hopefully when people hear this as well, and the album, when it does come out down the track, that this will add a little bit of extra excitement to it all, because it's cool.
That's really cool,
it's
man.
Interesting to listen to it.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. Thank you very much.
I'm going to let you go, and I'll chuck it up sometime in the near future. But
yeah, man,
really appreciate the time.
Oh, that's been awesome. I love getting a chance to chat about this sort of stuff. It's I don't always get a chance to chat my wife's ear off at the end of the day, and if I do, it's not, she doesn't want to hear about thrash riffs or anything like that. So it's really cool. It's been listening to the show, especially through last year. So yeah, it's been a real thrill to be able to come on myself. So thanks for having me.
Oh, pleasure, man. And as I said at the start, I think anybody that's interested and happy to be on the podcast, it means a hell of a lot to me. So it's good. So it's and I've said this to heaps of people. It's just so good to use something like a podcast to actually get to know people. Like, you play shows with people, you bump into them, but it's usually at a venue with everybody. Heaps of distractions. There's probably alcohol involved, and you can only get to a certain level of conversation before you're distracted by somebody else or whatever, and then that's it. Yes. And so this has been like a game changer for me. Like, there's been so many people I've known for so many years, and then you have this. I mean, when would you actually have a time to sit down for an hour or so and just have a conversation? And it's a really hard thing. No, that's it. And it's like, oh, yeah, do you want to just catch up and just talk for an hour? It's like,
yeah,
why?
It doesn't happen, man. Not even with your closest mates most of the time. Not for this length.
Yeah,
so
definitely.
And even as a listener, like, to be able to get that insight from people that you chat to, it's been awesome. Like, I listened at length to the one you did with Chris recently. Just started on the Hobbsy one. It's nice to be able to go back and just sort of all these people that just be able to really get back and listen to a full episode of your podcast and get that extra insight that you wouldn't have had a chance to do ever otherwise. So it's really cool.
Awesome, man. Well, have a good night, and we'll chat soon.
Thanks so much, Andy. Appreciate it, man.
If you want to follow Shaun and the progress of the new In Malice's Wake, The Blindness of Faith, you can go to inmaliceswake.com. You can search for In Malice's Wake on Facebook and Instagram and Twitter and YouTube, and everything will be in the show notes. You guys know the drill. Over at andysocial.net, or you can click through on your podcast player and there'll be a bunch of links there. If you actually go to my website, andysocial.net, I'll embed a bunch of videos and music and everything there so you can get a real taste of what the band's all about. But if you love thrash metal, or you just love some real freaking heavy metal, go and check it out. A great band, one of Australia's best, and I'm really proud to know the guys and have played with them and shared the stage, and I'm really hoping that we do more of that in the years to come as well. So make sure you go and check that out in Malice's Wake, and make sure you reach out to Shaun and let him know what you thought of this episode. Before we wrap it up, updates. If you are not aware already, and you probably are, and you're probably sick of me crapping on about it, but the new single, the first single of our brand new album, Fallen Idols, is out, and it's called United. Welcome back. You can go to lord.net.au/united. The video clip is there. The track listing for the new album is also there, including some really cool covers. So you might want to go and have a sticky beak to see which songs we've decided to cover for this release, and it's for the Australian release. So just a hint that if it's released in other parts of the world, there will be a different cover as well. So you might want to have a sticky beak and see what they all are. But go and check it all out. If you enjoy the single, please share it around. We really want a lot of people spreading the word, getting a bit of social media love happening. It's been a long time between albums, so we're really keen to get this out and reconnect with so many people from our past, but also connect with a lot of new fans as well. So please, if you've got some time, share the new single around. But go and check it out, lord.net.au/united. Also, from a self-starter point of view, I am still recording season 2. It's a massive undertaking. I possibly have overcommitted to this, but I love a challenge, so I'm getting into it. So if you've got any guests for season 2, any suggestions, and it can be for anybody across this big country of ours. It doesn't matter if it's regional or in a capital city, and it doesn't matter what they're doing, whether they have their own business or they're about to start their own business, or maybe they've got a second job, a third job, a fifth job, a 10th job. Maybe they earn a little bit of pocket money on weekends doing something different, or it doesn't even have to be anything unusual or different, just anything that involves a self-starter attitude, a bit of initiative in creating their own desirable lifestyle, as I always say. So any recommendations mean a hell of a lot to me, and I'm looking forward to launching season 2 in June. So stay tuned for that. But I think that is more than enough for me for another week. These episodes, a lot of them are being recorded in advance. So I have been slogging my guts out, getting all this stuff up and running. I'm looking forward to bringing you a whole range of awesome guests. There are still so many to come. And I think I've had a really great year so far with the people that I've had on, and it's just been getting better and better along the way. So thank you so much for the support, and continue to share these episodes around for anybody that you think may dig a particular guest or topic. So until next week, folks, ta-ta.